it's just very, very difficult sometimes to make the decision to have that conversation, whether because you're in your own denial about how, what you're experiencing, because you're afraid of what they're going to say to you, because of any number of things. And avoiding it for a really long time is a very common thing. I think I even talked about in my ChanSung reaction how much Han does display tendencies of like avoidant attachment behaviors, and that's a super duper common one, right? Again, avoidance isn't about like I don't want these people to love me, I don't want love and affection. It's about like I don't know that I trust that they're going to take care of me, and so I want to escape that situation of me like asking for their help and being rejected. Hello, Stay. Welcome back to the Stray Kids the Megaverse YouTube version, where a very tired therapist who likes to crash out about friendship a lot does that. Per usual, I'm Lullaby, and am said therapist who crashes out about friendship. I'm doing a great job at the intro this time around. We're doing great. We're doing great. As you may have noticed, based on the fact that I have a totally different look now, I did not watch HyunSung's 2kidsroom immediately after Felix and Sigmund's, or that same day, which was yesterday. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking when I claimed I would. I had such a bad migraine yesterday. I don't remember most of my reaction yesterday. I don't know what unhinged version of me thought that I was going to go to work, do a reaction video, go back to work, and then run a D&D game, and somewhere in there do another reaction video. I had such high aspirations. And in no universe were those aspirations going to be met. I don't know what I was thinking. Wow, you might say, I'm shocked you ran a D&D game. I didn't even do that. Half my players didn't show up. You know what I did? I had the other half of my players write a fan fiction of what might have happened in our session to tell the half the players who weren't there. I just said to the 4 other people, like, oh no, what could have happened today? They came across a mushroom carnival and learned what green apple bubblegum is. And got a coin of decision making and a button of buttoning and a rock of gravity finding, and none of those are magical items. So that was the fan fiction that we collectively wrote about the D&D game. I'm a great dungeon master. So anyway, now it's the next day. I've got a little more than an hour once again. I do feel like containing these to when I have to leave in an hour and a half is a great way for me to not spend 2 hours on 20-minute videos. Hopefully. Like I said at the end of yesterday's video, I'm not doing these in order because I have certain things I need to crash out about very specifically. So, cope. I'm doing this for free in my free time. Cope with me doing things in bad order. I have faith in your ability to be okay with that. Right. I know very little about what happens in here, but I do have a suspicion that from a therapist perspective, I'm gonna have a lot to say. Oh, these boys. Okay, let's listen to it.
야, 이거 언제냐? 야, 진짜 감자같이 생겼네, 둘 다. 머리가...
What is with them describing themselves as potatoes recently? Is there... What happened that, like, they're just in this emotionally resonating with potato state recently? I don't... Like, is this their new freaking echolalia? That they're just repeating the words potatoes? I don't know.
길었네, 이때는.
Baby, his hair
고생을 많이
was
해가지고 머리가...
long 6 months ago.
표정이 왜 이러냐.
표정 뭐야 이거?
Have you two not seen the memes?
에헤이. 에헤이, 이게, 에헤이.
아, 이때 진짜 제가 살짝 돌아 있는 애인 줄 알았어요.
귀엽구만. 대체적으로 내가 더 귀엽습니다. 이때.
Who the fuck is writing these captions calling out his untied shoelaces? That's so rude. I'd be so stressed. My shoelaces are untied so often.
내가 더 귀엽습니다. 이때. 이때가 아마 제가 좀 흑화돼 있을 때였는데 이때가 기억이 남네요. 현진이 얼마나 깨발랄해. 내 여자친구 같잖아. 아, 사귀는 거 들키면 안 되는데.
아, 한이랑
Just joking. How many times do they have to be like, we look like a couple? Yeah, you all look like couples. Turns out you love each other deeply, and just like looking like you love each other deeply looks like being a couple. I don't know what to tell people. I'm baffled by this sense that like different types of deep love just inherently look super different. They don't really. They really don't. If you love people deeply, you look like you love people deeply.
진짜 사이가 좋을 땐 진짜 좋고 사이가 안 좋을 땐 진짜
우리랑 할 것만
투어 때 안 좋았죠. 그 미국 투어 때 매니아 때 시작 전에 싸워가지고 무대 하면서 풀었어요. 지선이랑 막 이렇게 서로 이렇게 주고받는 게 있었는데 무대 위에서 이제 그때 서로 이제 눈빛을 보고 미안하다. 공연 딱 끝나고 미안했다 이렇게 해가지고 풀었던 기억이 있습니다.
그런 이벤트 때 빼고는 다 좋았죠. 이때도 좋았고 여기 있을 때는 다 기본적으로 사이가 좋았었을 때. 지금 사이 안 좋은데요? 장난입니다. 이때도
That's sort of
좋았고
interesting.
여기 있을 때는 다 기본적으로 사이가 좋았었을 때. 지금 사이가 좋았죠. 이때도 좋았고 여기 있을 때는 다 기본적으로 사이가 좋았었을 때. 지금 사이 안 좋은데요? 장난입니다.
It's such a push and pull between them, and it sounds like it's been a push and pull between them. And it's kind of interesting because I just realized I had a cough drop in my mouth, so apologies if there have been weird microphone noises. I feel like every time there's some types of like 2kidsroom or some type of like combination of them talking about their past, and this happens a lot with a lot of situations. Like this will happen with the 1kidsroom. This will happen with some of the songs that they talk about, things like that. They'll always basically say like, oh yeah, there are these problems, but those problems were in the past. Everything's fine now. This is like a really, really consistent thing that I've noticed. Like Han will like said that when he was talking about Alien, he was like, oh yeah, I, wrote this about like pre-debut self. So that's in the past. But then you read like some of the things that he was writing, so he said recently that, right, he wrote Mess, like later in the same year that he released Alien. And it's like, okay, I don't think that Alien was 100% in the past if you were writing like some of these other things that have a lot of similar reflections of who you are and what you were feeling. And of course, now they'll say like, that's all in the past too. And sometimes it's more believable than other times about what is in the past. And I feel like this has been the case with other 2kidsrooms as well. It's really interesting that they bring up the Maniac tour, and maybe what Hyunjin was saying was like there were specific times at the Maniac tour he's sort of recalling a specific memory when they weren't good. It's a little bit unclear by the context in the subs whether he's saying like consistently throughout the tour we were on and off fighting, or if he was saying like there was a time during the tour when we weren't good. I have a feeling that if they're talking about like not being on great terms with each other. They're talking about sort of this on and off fighting. Like they have periods of time when they are just more likely to be getting into fights or to be getting into conflict with each other. Because I'm pretty sure I haven't rewatched it super recently, but I'm pretty sure that when they filmed their last Two Kids Room, which was in their break in the Maniac tour, I think, if I recall correctly. No, that is incorrect. It was right before the Maniac tour that they filmed it. Yes, because they filmed it at the beginning of 2022. Right. Yeah, so like I think at that point they had brought up like, yeah, we used to fight a lot, but we don't really anymore. And maybe they were on good terms at that point. And, you know, I have found that both for people who display these very ADHD tendencies that both of them display, they both just like Hyunjin's one of the most ADHD coded people I've experienced for a lot of reasons. I'm not saying he has ADHD. As you know, if you have watched any of my other content, I am not diagnosing anybody at any point with anything. I'm just saying that, like, there are traits that are very, very similar to some of these things. Han exhibits a lot of ADHD traits as well. One thing I've noticed with ADHD people, and also people who exhibit ADHD traits who aren't ADHD, right? Whether that's because of, like, a lot of dissociation or certain types of other like cognitive difficulties that impact memory and impulsivity, you know, whatever it is. There's a difficulty of empathizing with yourself in a different situation. So people will be like, well, right now I feel that this way. And so I've probably always felt this way, and I probably will always feel this way. They might know intellectually that that's untrue, but there's no empathy for themselves in a different situation. So if you ask, like, well, how would you feel if this happened? The answer is, like, I don't fucking know. Or if you ask, like, hey, 3 weeks ago, you were actually saying this other thing. Like, you just told me that you've been feeling pretty good recently, but 2 weeks ago, you said you were incredibly depressed. Like, what's up with that? They'll be like, I forget what I was feeling then. And so what can happen pretty frequently, like one thing that can happen is that when you have two people in that situation, they just never really, like whatever their current experience is, just probably is their experience long term. They're like, well, we're good right now, so all of this was in the past. Even if there's a consistent sort of push and pull where like, yeah, sometimes we're really good and sometimes we're really not. It sometimes takes several cycles of that type of behavior to be able to say, like, yeah, this is clearly a thing with us. So that can be one thing that happens. I think it's also the case that from a, like, marketing idol image perspective, it's really difficult to say, like, yeah, we're currently having these issues. We hear a lot about issues that they're going through in retrospect, like that they went through. But if you look at the content they were putting out at that time, like officially, or what they were saying officially, they're really trying to, like, whether successfully or not. Sometimes you won't see it at all, and you'll be like, oh, wow, that's really interesting to know. And sometimes you will be watching things and you'll be like, I don't think that person is okay, but they're certainly not going to be talking about it right then at that time. And I mean, this is true for people in general also. People do tend to be a little bit better at recognizing in retrospect what they went through. But I think it's also just, again, from an idol image perspective, for a variety of reasons, it's not like a stellar idea all the time to be really vulnerable about difficulties you're currently having, because fans do not react in reasonable ways. And so it's not always helpful to be that vulnerable about something you are currently experiencing to broad audiences who aren't going to understand the nuance of those experiences. Yeah, so I just think it's interesting that they're noting this pattern, because in the past, they haven't always noted, like, this is a recurrent pattern. No.
현진아! 오랜만이야. 잘 지냈어? 머리가 많이 길었네.
갑자기 졸려졌어 너.
What's up, baby?
쌉.
네, 잘 지내셨고요.
저요?
아니요, 저 잘 지내셨고요. 딸기가 맛있나요?
맛있습니다.
어떤 과일을 제일 좋아하세요?
저 수박이요.
수박이요? 저 오늘 수박 립밤 바르고 왔는데.
야 근데 그 바지는 왜 산 거야?
그러니까 모델이 입었을 땐 달랐지. 모델이
Oh shit, that's right. It's two of the most ADHD motherfuckers having a conversation. There's gonna be this is gonna be ChanSung all over again for me, isn't it? This is gonna be a wild conversation. But it's also gonna be different because they shared their bathroom, they lived together for a while, and their relationship clearly really developed in a very specific type of way. I'm looking forward to seeing how they communicate with each other. In what I'm sure will also be a bit of a ricochet.
지내셨고요. 딸기가 맛있나요?
맛있습니다.
어떤 과일을 제일 좋아하세요?
저 수박이요.
수박이요? 저 오늘 수박 립밤 바르고 왔는데.
야 근데 그 바지는 왜 산 거야?
Just skip the
그러니까
flirting.
모델이 입었을 땐 달랐지. 모델이 180일 줄 내가 어떻게 알았겠냐? 원래 이렇게 올려서 곱창 바지처럼 입는 거야. 근데 180이 그렇게 입으면 예쁘게 쭈글 져. 근데 난 여기까지 쭈글 져 버리는 거야. 그냥 난 인간 아코디언이 돼 버리는 거야. 그걸 입으면.
나 이렇게 TV 보고 있었는데 갑자기 야 나 바지 샀는데 봐줘봐.
기장이 많이 길어.
바지 앞으로 펄럭 이러고. 좋은데?
아 그때 나는 너무 패션에
That's
스스로
such a
본조가
big,
있었어.
like, how do I react to this situation? What do I do? Okay, you have fun, baby.
좀 덜 입긴 한다 그런 거.
원래 튜닝의 끝은 순정이잖아. 기본 빵만 잘하면 되더라.
아 그치.
그 트위드 재질의 항공 점퍼 같은 게 있었어. 그거에다가 털비니에다가 하얀색 바지에다가 워커를 신어버린 거야. 공항 출근 때. 근데 그걸 보고 내가 그 이후부터 충격을 받아가지고 모든 이제 패션 유튜버들이 기본템이 일단 있고 그 다음에 포인트를 사야 되는데 나는 포인트만 산 거야.
I love that you can tell that at some point he went on some hyperfixation deep dive on how to put together an outfit. And just stored in his head and is now just info dumping this hyperfixation that he probably went on for like 2 weeks. Because he says that he does that with like wiki things and videos and things like that, and I have been the initiator of this conversation. Usually within my special interests, though, I'm not ADHD, it's just the autism. But, like, I've been the initiator of this conversation, but I have also been on the other side of the, oh, you got really into that for 15 minutes. And now you have information for me. Conversation so many times.
그러니까 나한테 기본은 빤스 한 장이 다였어.
야 근데 팬들 아직 빤스 썰 모르는구나.
수박 빤스? 그게 내가 데뷔 직전이었어. 그때.
맞아. 우리 다 살
때였는데 위에 밴드 쪽이.
I never want to know anything titled The Underwear Story about a teenage boy. Because there's no universe in which that story is not, like, vaguely just unhinged in some way. Yeah.
초록색이고 밑에가 핑크색이네.
don't need
근데 원래
to
그게 찐 핑크였는데 올해 입어서 연 핑크가 됐어. 그거 항상 돌아다니고 있으면 그 수박 팬티 하면서
아니
했는데
이게 나 이제 너무 꼴도 보기 싫은 거지.
That's so fair.
작당무이를 하고 그럼 저 수박 팬티를 한번 잘라보는 건
We hate the watermelon underwear coalition. Yeah. Teenage boys living in dorms. I went to an early college. I went to college my first week at college was the week I turned 17. And a lot of people my year were like 16. There were a few people who were 15. There were some of us who were 17. And we lived with minimal supervision. Like we had, you know, kind of like we had RDs who were adults, right? And yeah, people sure have really silly drama. Like, how do we destroy the watermelon underwear? That
내 팬티가
resonates.
팬티도 아니었어. 야, 봐봐 한 다음에 내 앞에서 그거 내일 입으려고 그랬는데 그래서 내가 처음 이제 정산을 받고 샀던 게 팬티인데 그게 지금 너네 회사 거야. 베르사체 팬티야. 맞아. 흰색이랑 검은색.
너가 진짜
You were
자랑스럽게
so
팬티를
broke,
보여줬어.
and you bought
베르사체 팬티
Versace underwear?
나한테 안 맞았을 때부터 같이 입었던 팬티인데 애들이 단체로 그거 자른다고 다 나와가지고 팬티 처형식을 본다는 게 되게 재밌었어요.
Yeah.
돈 벌면 꼭 비싼 팬티 사야지 해가지고 지금 에서 사요.
나는 너를 맨 처음 봤을 때는 회사 들어가기 한 달 전인가? 그 쇼케이스를 보러 갔지. 보러 갔다가 이제 오는 지하철에서 정확하게 기억나. 그
맞아.
주황색 긴팔 여기 막 레터링 되어 있는 거기다가 이제 자켓 하나 입고 헤드셋 끼고 전철 타서
에이. 맞아. 근데 그땐 그랬어.
그때 나 보고 와 저런 애들이 연예인 하는구나. 아 진짜로 막 그러고 나서 회사에서 보니까 뭐 노래도 잘해, 랩도 잘해, 춤도 잘 춰. 와 이런 애들이 진짜 아이돌 하는구나. 난 너 보면서 되게 자극 많이 받았어.
현진이를 볼 때 이렇게 생겨야 아이돌 할 수 있구나가 요즘 들어서 더 세게 드는 것 같아. 그러니까 어떻게 저렇게 생길 수 있을까? 너무 잘생겼으니까. 진짜 키스하고 싶어.
갑자기 왜 얘기가 글로
I like when you can watch Hyunjin trying not to dissociate from being complimented. He has like this very specific look when he's being complimented, and he's not 100% certain what to do about it. And it looks so much like the look it's like almost a deer in headlights look of like, I shouldn't be trying to escape this situation. There's nothing to escape in this situation, but I kind of want to emotionally escape this situation. And it's very funny, and I find it funny that he like immediately does that, and then Han immediately makes a joke, and he just like snaps back, right? Like, okay, I can avoid the part of this that was a compliment that I don't know how to respond to.
너무 잘생겼으니까. 진짜 키스하고 싶어.
갑자기 왜 얘기가 글로 틀려?
장난이 아니야. 장난이야.
너가 내 얼굴을 약간 특히도 좋아해.
그러니까 우리 팀에 잘생긴 애들 많지. 창빈이 형도 대표적으로 너무 잘생겼고 한이라는 애도 진짜 잘생겼고 솔직히 걔네 둘이 투탑이긴 한데
손가락이 안 접히잖아.
반대로 좀 모봐 한번. 일로 와봐. 반대로 보자.
나 일단 너의 감성을 좋아해. 너가 쓰는 단어들이 내가 좋아하는 것들인 것 같아. 난 네 가사가 좋아. 항상 가사 보고 충격받아. 야.
Something I've read from Korean speakers and like K-nets is that apparently Han does have a very specific way of speaking that tends to be a little bit more on like, I don't know if like the flamboyant side is the right way to put it. I don't really have the language to describe it, but I'm wondering if the words you use is referring not just to like his lyrics, but also the way that like the actual way that he speaks that I don't really have enough context to like speak to, but I do my understanding is that he does have a way of speaking. And I also wonder if it tends to be like a little bit more on the poetic side. Again, it's really hard to tell with the way that captions get translated, like how it is that people speak, like if people do speak more narratively or poetically or in sort of more of a like cutesy fashion or with like certain types of accents or inflections or things like that. If you're not just like a Korean speaker, but often a native speaker or somebody who has like lived in the culture for a really long time. Just like knowing how to speak Korean does not necessarily give you, just like knowing how to speak any language, knowing how to speak the language does not necessarily give you the context of the way that people are using the language within different contexts. And so I sort of wonder if Hyunjin is speaking to more than just the lyrics, but a little bit more about like daily, when he says your vibe. I don't get the sense that he's speaking just about like you're a really great
이걸 이렇게 한 번
songwriter.
더 틀어가지고 이렇게 쓸 수가 있구나를 매번 느껴.
고맙다.
그 너의 감성은 진짜 너무 특별해. 난 한 번도 가사로 이렇게 충격을 받아본 적이 없어. 다른 가수들을 봐. 그래서 나중에 너가
Something else that's true that I, as far as I understand, is that Korean also tends to be a bit of a more metaphoric language in the way that things are phrased than English. And so probably a lot of like I read a lot of Han's lyrics and a lot of Hyunjin's lyrics too, and the translations, and I can tell that like when I listen to them and when I read the translations, I can tell that there's just a lot that gets lost because I don't have the connection to the original language. And it's really clear that there's like, especially the way that Han has talked about writing his lyrics before, there's a lot of intention in the way the language is used that you just can't translate very easily, especially directly. I think that, when people translate like poetry, it tends to be a lot less of a direct translation than what often happens with lyrics. And obviously, when they rewrite their lyrics in a different language, instead of just like translating them for the sake of, the lyric books, sometimes the lyrics will change somewhat dramatically. But even then, there's still only so much you can do when you have to fit within certain like schemas. And so I've gotten into these boys enough that I have tried to start learning Korean, but I know it'll take a really long time, and I know that there's just a lot missing in the poetry of it that is going to be really hard to understand without like really starting to get into like K-net sphere and like reading about what they're telling me about the poetry of it, because it's just, yeah, it's not easy to translate or understand in that way.
이제 빛을 발할 것 같아. 명반.
추구하는 게 나랑 비슷.
명반.
고맙다.
그 너의 감성은 진짜 너무 특별해. 난 한 번도 가사로 이렇게 충격을 받아본 적이 없어. 다른 가수들을 봐. 그래서 나중에 너가 이제 빛을 발할 것 같아. 명반.
추구하는 게 나랑 비슷하잖아. 이게 단어가 적절한지 모르겠는데 약간 히키코모리 찐따 느낌이 우리가 그걸 추구해. 그걸 좋아하고.
맞아.
어느샌가 이제 너도 만화를 보게 되면서 그리고 어느샌가 락을 좋아하게 되면서 그게 어쩔 수 없나 봐. 이게 취미나 그게 같은 사람들은 그래가지고
그게 멋있어.
그게 멋이야. 근데
그래. 진짜 멋있어. 이것도 팬들은 모를 텐데 우리 그때 가평 스키즈 코드.
That is super normal, and I've also found that it's really normal between people who get very, very invested in hobbies and in interests, that they really, really influence each other. Especially when you're living with each other, you know, and it's not necessarily just like you're around something a lot, so you start to like it, though that is often the case, right? When we spend more time with people, we like them more. This is just a fact of people. Like, the best way to learn to like somebody is to have to spend a lot of time with them. So when we spend more time around people, we like them more. When we spend more time around a thing, we like it more. That's sort of a common human trait, but I found that especially people who get really invested in things, right? They get really invested, thus also in other people, the people around them. And when they're people who want to be liked by the people around them, which is most of us, but like, especially if they have strong interest in the people around them, if they're similar to the people around them, if they respect the people around them, they start to get interested in similar things as a bonding experience as well, as a, you know, even if they're not specifically bonding over it, you want to understand the things that the people you love and respect. So yeah, like, if you're kind of already a bit of an introvert nerd and you're living right next to another introvert nerd, you're gonna start getting into the same shit they're into. As just especially if you're both the type of people who really invest in hobbies and interests. Because if you're somebody who like casually engages with hobbies, the people around you, like, they're not going to be as fascinated by those things. Like, maybe they try to get into it for a minute and they sort of back off of it because there's like not much to hold on to unless they happen to be really interested in it when they try it. But if you really invest in a hobby and the person next to you is somebody who really invests in their hobbies, and they see you really fascinated and really interested and with a lot of knowledge and with a lot of like passion for something, they're going to be like, okay, this makes more sense for me to try to get into because clearly this is something that we could bond over. Again, whether that's intentional or subconscious. And then they are also somebody who gets really into the things they like, and now you're both stuck in this together.
코드 내가 이제 회사한테 얘기를 했단 말이야.
그치.
그냥 그 스키즈 코드를 핑계로 멤버들을 다 같이 모아서 한번 얘기를 하고 싶다. 근데 이제 도망가셨잖아요.
그쵸.
이제 스키즈 코드.
취미나 그게 같은 사람들은
그게
그래가지고
멋있어.
그게 멋이야. 근데
그래. 진짜 멋있어. 이것도 팬들은 모를 텐데 우리 그때 가평.
I don't remember which one the Gapyeong one was. Oh, now I need to know. I need to know. I can't be lost about the context. Hold on. I'm pulling up my phone. You don't understand. I hate not. I hope it's one I've watched. I have not watched all of them. I've watched many of them. Skills code. I just need to find like a screenshot to know which one this is. Oh, okay. I know of this one. I have not watched it, but it's obviously a very well-known one. Okay. Thank you for your patience. I needed to know.
스키즈 코드 내가 이제 회사한테 얘기를 했단 말이야.
그치.
그냥 그 스키즈 코드를 핑계로 멤버들을 다 같이 모아서 한번 얘기를 하고 싶다. 근데 이제 도망가셨잖아요.
그쵸.
이제 거기서 이제 얘기를 하려고 그랬는데 이제 너가 이제 도망갔지만 그 이유가 있었지.
그치. 근데 진짜 그때는 말을 하려고 했지. 심리적인 요인인지 뭐 때문에 그런지 내가 원래 잘 체하진 않거든? 근데 이게 그걸 말할 생각이랑 어떻게 말하지 하다고 나도 스스로 압박이 되니까 체해버린 거야. 진짜 근데 이게 너무 급체였어. 어쩔 수 없이 나도 말하려던 거를 어떻게 좀 길게 써서 톡방에 보냈지.
여기서 막 다들 이제 막 이렇게 하고 있다 갑자기 다들 카톡을 봐. 눈물. 다 이유가 있었구나.
지금은 안 그런데 내가 딱 안 좋아지고 나서부터 너한테 제일 불편하지 않은데 뭘 어색했어 왠지. 이게 너한테 어떻게 들을지 모르겠지만 동경심과 약간
There's clearly more there to watch. Do we know what? Because they keep saying it. Um, like they keep saying like what they keep saying like oh that's what it was. That's do we know exactly like besides like yes obviously they we know that Han had anxiety issues. I don't remember when this code was in combination with when other things happened. I might have to just look into that more. Um, yeah, so let's talk a little bit about somatic. Yeah, I can talk about this quickly. Quickly, for my definition of quickly. Let's talk a little bit about the somatic relationship with emotions. And by somatic, I mean your body, right? The things we experience in our bodies. So, emotions happen in our body. People have this idea that, like, somehow emotions are conceptually different from what we are physically experiencing, and that's really not the case. There aren't any emotions that we have that we don't experience in some way in our body. Even in cases of synesthesia, we're still processing an emotion, just not through the normal bodily functions we would expect. And I'll explain that a little bit further. But essentially, emotions are just physical responses to internal and external stimuli. So whether it's because the way that we are thinking is causing a response based on what our like thoughts are telling our bodies need to be happening, or whether it's, you know, external, what other people are saying, fucking the lights are too bright, whatever it is. Emotions are just our body responding to what's going on. And a lot of people will be like, well, some emotions are just like all in your mind. And that's not, you start to investigate that more and it's never the case. There's no emotion that is just in your thoughts. Usually our thoughts create emotions that create more thoughts, right? Like, and whether the emotion or the thought comes first is a little unclear. Often it is the thought that comes first, but like our body is processing things before we even realize it. So the whole point of dissociation from a protective aspect is to sort of avoid whether, you know, from a derealization standpoint, that sort of tries to protect you from external stimuli impacting you, or a depersonalization standpoint, which is trying to avoid the physical responses of emotions, or pain, right? Like literal physical pain, things like that, which also causes emotions because there's a lot of association. And in fact, we know that certain types of emotions, so heartbreak causes a type of pain that is physical pain. Sometimes taking an Advil can reduce the intensity of heartbreak. Basically, every emotion we experience in our bodies in some way. So, you know, the really standard, typical examples that you might think of are like anxiety and shaking. Or sometimes you'll have joy in shaking. So, you know, for us autists out there, there's self-regulation stimming, but there's also joyful stimming. And those sometimes look very similar, but they're based on two different emotions. You know, with panic, you're going to get an increased heart rate. That's a lot of what panic is an increased heart rate. There is a lot of impact on the gastrointestinal system as related to our emotions, and vice versa. Our microbiome, we have not remotely unlocked the secrets of the microbiome. And probably a lot of our personalities come from a combination of the microbiome and like hormones. Like a shocking amount of our personalities. I think everybody thinks that all of our personalities are just very located in our brains. And that's just really not the case. We have an entire system that all functions together. In addition, sometimes there are things like synesthesia, as I said. So sometimes people will feel an emotion, and the way that they know they're feeling an emotion, it's not because they're getting like anxiety butterflies in their stomach. It's not because their heart rate is increasing. It's not because they're getting lightheaded. It's because they start hearing music. And based on the song they start hearing, they know what emotion they're feeling. That is still a somatic response, right? That's still a bodily response. It's just that the somatic processing is being done through an atypical sense. Just like there are some wires being crossed as to, what of our many senses, we have many more than 5 senses. Like at the very, very base, we have at least 8, but like there's been identification of up to like 24 distinct senses. It's actually very complicated. But, we're just processing through a sense that is not typical. And oftentimes people will experience minor synesthesia of multiple senses. So maybe they're processing both like visual changes and auditory changes. So when Han is saying like, I don't know if it was psychological, like it probably was. Really severe indigestion can absolutely happen because of significant like mental health concerns. And unfortunately, we've really stigmatized that fact through the idea of psychosomatic, like the way that psychosomatic has been utilized by the healthcare industry has really harmed people's ability to admit, like, I am having a psychosomatic response. Like, yes, I am in severe pain. That pain is largely psychological, but I still deserve to get pain relief, right? Because it takes a long time to resolve some of these problems. And if somebody is having severe gastrointestinal issues that are largely being motivated by severe anxiety or severe, like, other, like, complex PTSD, they deserve to have appropriate medical intervention for their gastrointestinal issues while they are getting treated for their complex PTSD, because the latter part of that is going to take 4 years. And they deserve to not be in chronic ongoing suffering that's only going to get worse, because once you start impacting one health system, it often, domino effects if it's not appropriately, like, medically handled. Now, this is a different rant. I work primarily with disabled neurodivergent people. I have a lot of opinions about our medical system and medical systems, not just the United States, but like globally, and how we globally dismiss legitimate medical concerns due to the possibility that they're like faked somehow. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. I'm very frustrated by it. Okay, we're gonna move on.
그 스키즈 코드를 핑계로 멤버들을 다 같이 모아서
This is obviously super
한번
sweet
얘기를 하고
also,
싶다. 근데
right?
이제
Trying to
도망가셨다.
figure out how you
이제 거기서 이제
kind
얘기를
of have an
하려고
intervention,
그랬는데
but
너가 이제 도망갔지만 그 이유가 있었지.
그치. 근데 진짜 그때는 말을 하려고 했지. 심리적인 요인인지 뭐 때문에 그런지 내가 원래 잘 체하진 않거든. 근데
Yeah, I
이제
see this
그걸
all the time.
말할
It's
생각이랑
so
어떻게
common
말하지 알아.
that people get so worried about how to be vulnerable, especially to the people they love the most. I think a lot of people sort of assume that, like, well, of course I'm going to confide in the people I love the most, but sometimes it's the people you love the most who are the hardest to confide in. It doesn't matter how much you love them or how much you trust them. I think especially with people who chronically overthink, whose anxiety is sort of a secondary symptom of something else. It's just very, very difficult sometimes to make the decision to have that conversation, whether because you're in your own denial about how, what you're experiencing, because you're afraid of what they're going to say to you, because of any number of things. And avoiding it for a really long time is a very common thing. I think I even talked about in my ChanSung reaction how much Han does display tendencies of like avoidant attachment behaviors, and that's a super duper common one, right? Again, avoidance isn't about like I don't want these people to love me, I don't want love and affection. It's about like I don't know that I trust that they're going to take care of me, and so I want to escape that situation of me like asking for their help and being rejected.
그리고 나도 스스로 압박이 되니까 체해버린 거야. 진짜 근데 이게 너무 급체였어. 어쩔 수 없이 나도 말하려던 거를 어떻게 좀 길게 써서 톡방에 보냈지.
요새 막 다들 이제 막 이렇게 하고 있다고.
Especially for somebody
다들
who
카톡
knows how to express themselves in words
눈물.
so well, and who knows how to preemptively express themselves in words so well. It's a really useful skill. And it's something that I end up recommending to a lot of people and a lot of clients. I have a number of autistic ADHD clients who really, 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 really struggle with engaging in-person vocal, like, conflict or potential conflict or vulnerability, because of that improvisational skill and because of their level of fear, and because they tend to freeze, and because they tend to forget their social scripts. And they do learn to rely on being very eloquent very often through text. I think the sort of standard response is like never have serious conversations through text. But for many people, it's actually a really important skill to learn how to have effective, high tension conversation through text. And that's a necessary skill for the people involved.
다 이유가 있었구나.
지금은 안 그런데 내가 딱 안 좋아지고 나서부터 너한테 제일 불편하지 않은데 뭘 어색했어 왠지. 이게 너한테 어떻게 들을지 모르겠지만 동경심과 약간의 질투심이 있었고 아마 지금도 조금은 있는 것 같아. 왜냐면 내가 너를 너무 아티스트로서는 너무 좋아하거든.
나 너무 높게 평가해.
아니야, 높게 평가하는 게 아니야. 왜냐면 너란 사람이 난 그냥 뭐 있어. 넌 알 거야. 내가 좋아하는 아티스트들이 누구인지. 근데 그 사람들과 너가 겹쳐 보이니까 그쪽에서 동경심과 질투심이 생기는 거야.
무슨 말인지 알겠다.
음악
Sometimes I wonder if when people say jealousy, they mean envy. And I kind of wonder that here, but I don't know. Not enough information to really dig into that.
이나 뭐 그림이나 따로따로 보는 거 말고 종합적인 예술이란 것을 봤을 때 이런 애가 예술을 잘 하는구나라고 생각이 들었어. 그래서 얘도 천재구나. 그래서 내가 좀 안 좋아지면서 너한테 얘기를 걸거나 장난을 치는 게 더 힘들어졌던 거야. 그리고 또 동갑이고.
그치.
그게 아마 제일 컸을 거야, 동갑인 게.
그러니까 우리가 만약에 누구 하나 형 동생이었으면 누구 하나 굽히고 들어갔겠지. 근데 이제 동갑이니까. 근데 너가 나를 되게
Yeah. It's so easy for people to not see their own skill, not see their own talents, not see how truly exceptional they are. Like, it's very easy for us to dismiss ourselves. It's very easy for us to think of ourselves as just like, this is the bar that I'm just supposed to always be hitting. And I think especially for people who tend to be very skilled at a young age and who work really hard for those skills, especially who are skilled at a young age in things that are atypical to be skilled at that age, we start to see our best as the lowest acceptable bar for us to hit. So we see 100% as what we're supposed to be hitting all the time. And if we only get to 85, 90%, we feel like a failure. And we always feel like we need to raise that 100% bar. I say we. I haven't had this problem in many years. I spent a long time unpacking that one, but it's a really, really common experience. And then you see all of the things that other people are skilled in that you are not skilled in. When we can't be skilled in everything, it's not possible. But especially with people who really love a lot of different things, and I find that this is super true of artists who really admire a lot of different types of art forms that that is impossible to be good at as many art forms as artists want to be good at, you know? And then you start that comparison trap with the things that you're not good at that other people are. And especially when you're struggling with your sense of self, when you're struggling with who you are, when you're struggling with what you want, when you're struggling with executive functioning, when you're struggling with, motivation, seeing people who you admire can be actually really emotionally devastating. A lot of people struggle to understand that, but for a lot of folks, being around people who you admire and who make you want to be better at certain things, if you are not doing well, can be absolutely demoralizing. And then, of course, it's interesting what they say about age. I've talked about the age thing a little bit, like culturally. And this is sort of one of the pitfalls of, like, you set up a system in which people of different ages are meant to sort of support each other in different ways. But then you have this sort of same age thing of, like, oh, now it's not within our rules and guidelines that we're supposed to support and protect each other in certain ways. And so we don't know how to, even though we really want to, because it's not within the rules and structures that, like, that is what you're supposed to do. And so that can cause, that's sort of one of the downsides of creating a structure like that has this sort of implicit, like, hierarchy of support, is that sometimes those peer levels do really struggle with things that ideally they would know how to do with each other, and that they do know how to do with each other with people of a different age, right?
동경한다고 했잖아. 근데 난 지금 현재 존재하는 모든 아티스트들 중에서 너를 제일 동경해. 그러니까 난 너보다 잘하는 사람
Oh no, Han hated that.
진짜 아무 거짓 없이 뭔가 너를 놓치면 안 될 것 같은 느낌이었어. 약간 너무 천재들은 자기가 얼마나 아무 거짓 없이 지금 현재 존재하는 모든 아티스트들 중에서 너를 제일 동경해. 그러니까 난 너보다 잘하는 사람을 아직까지 본 적이 없는 것 같아. 진짜 아무 거짓 없이 뭔가 너를 놓치면 안 될 것 같은 느낌이었어. 약간 너무 천재들은
I might want to ask somebody about that translation, because I don't know if they just skipped somewhere in the conversation or if there's, like, something implied that I'm missing. If I were to lose you,
아무 거짓 없이 뭔가 너를 놓치면 안 될 것 같은 느낌이었어.
felt like that could never happen. Or if he might be doing that thing where you start a sentence, and then sort of change the direction of your sentence partway through. I do that all the fucking time. feel like whatever was just said that there, I feel like there's a lot we just missed, and whatever we just said there was really. Also, was Han wiping away tears? I really couldn't tell. It looked like he might have been, but he might have also just been like emotionally going through a lot. I don't know if there was like a cut made and we missed something, or if there's something that I'm not understanding in the translation of how things are being spoken, communicated. There's a lot of depth to whatever just happened that we are missing in some way, or that I am missing in some way. And I could take some guesses at that depth. I'm not super inclined to, because I think that some of those guesses are intense. And I don't like guesswork. But I think it's really clear that, you know, Hyunjin is both talking about, like, what Han means to him as an artist, but, like, because Han is just an artist at his core, what Han means to Hyunjin as an artist is also what Han means to Hyunjin as a person. Because that's just, like, that's part of who he is. And, you know, losing him would have also lost his artistry and lost that genius and lost, like, a lot, you know?
약간 너무 천재들은 자기가 얼만큼 멋있고
yeah,
잘난지 모르는 건가라고 생각이 들 정도로 정말 내가
That's
보기엔
exactly what
너무
happens.
멋있고
It's sort of like a
너무
reverse
천재적인
Dunning
아티스트
thing.
같은데 뭔가
Inverse
본인이
Dunning
그런
Kruger.
거를 100% 모르는 것 같아서 그게 좀 아쉽고 한이가 날 그렇게까지 뭔가 리스펙하는 거는 처음 알았으니까 왜 평소에도 막 칭찬 엄청 많이 해주죠. 근데 살짝의 질투심이 섞여 있을 만큼 나를 이렇게 막 동경한다고 했을 땐 에? 신기했어요.
우리 최신에
But it's
싸웠던
also
게 1년 전이죠.
mutual.
내가 너랑 싸울 때 가장 머리에 남았던 말. 연민해. 무슨 말인지 처음 몰라가지고. 진짜로. 너를 동정해가 아니고 아니야 하고 너가 고치고 난 아직도 그때가 기억나. 그런 너를 동정해. 아니 나는 너를 연민해. 라고 하는데 그 단어가 뭔지 모르겠는 거야. 근데 일단 그 안에는 기쁜 뜻이 숨어 있을 거라고 생각을 하고 그냥 앞에서는 그 말이 뭐야라고 못했지. 그래서 그 엄청 울고 방에 들어가서 뭔 말이지? 이렇게 하면서 연민애가 뭔 말이지? 그냥
This is where the embraceautism.com ribbon comes in. Oh no. Oh. This isn't meant to be a funny story. This is so fucking funny. Oh wow, is that yeah.
근데 그땐 진짜 딱 그 연민이라는 단어를 대체할 수 있는 게 없었어. 그렇게 넌 약간 그 아픈 손가락 같은 느낌이었지. 너무 천재성이 가득한 한 소년의 팀 생활에 대한 무슨 진짜 외계인 같았어. 근데 진짜 리스펙해 넌 난 놈이야.
So that was like a year ago, they said?
근데
있을 거라고 생각을 하고 랑 싸울
아티스트 같은데 뭔가 본인이 그런 거를 100% 모르는 것 같아서 그게 좀 아쉽고 한이가 날 그렇게까지 뭔가 리스펙하는 거는 처음 알았으니까 왜 평소에도 막 칭찬 엄청 많이 해주죠. 근데 살짝의 질투심이 섞여 있을 만큼 나를 이렇게 막 동경한다고 했을 땐 에? 신기했어요.
우리 최신에 싸웠던 게 1년 전이죠. 내가 너랑 싸울 때 가장 머리에 남았던 말. 연민해. 무슨 말인지 처음 몰라가지고. 진짜로. 너를 동정해가 아니고 아니야 하고 너가 고치고 난 아직도 그때가 기억나. 그런 너를 동정해. 아니 나는 너를 연민해.
I know the difference in this in like English, and I would be able to really go into it in English, but I don't know the connotations of the words in this
그래서
case in
그 엄청
Korean, so
울고
I
방에
don't think it's
들어가서
helpful.
뭔 말이지? 이렇게 하면서
using the same words.
연민애가 뭔 말이지? 했는데
근데 그땐
so funny.
진짜 딱 그 연민이라는 단어를 대체할 수
And
있는
I
게
mean, it
없었어.
is really
넌
interesting
약간
that, like-
그 아픈 손가락 같은 느낌이었지. 너무 천재성이 가득한 한
Yeah,
소년의
like, he does still struggle.
팀 생활에 대한
with the socializing, you know?
진짜 외계인 같았어. 근데 진짜 리스펙해.
And Hyunjin growing up enough to realize that, like, yeah, this is just a different person.
근데 딱 그때 이제 너가 용기 내가지고 얘기하고 나서 그때 이후로 너가 진짜 좋아졌어. 안정돼 보인다고 해야 되나?
맞아.
그때는 약간 너한테 손 내밀어 주는 사람이 진짜 많았거든? 내가 느끼기에. 근데 너가 그거를 못 봤어. 그래서 이게 막 옆에서 이렇게 손을 내미는데 하나도 안 보이고 난 외로워, 난 외톨이야 이렇게 되는 거야. 그치.
Yeah, that's really common for people who are struggling with a lot of things. I mean, I think that that's like one of the most common things that I think I hear as a therapist is how difficult it is for people to see the people around them who are trying to reach out to them, who are trying to love them, who would try to love them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But again, when you really have a hard time with yourself, when you really don't know if you love yourself, if you like yourself, when you don't see your own value to other people, it's really easy to dismiss those hands because the immediate sort of response is, well, maybe they're not reaching out to who I really am, right? Maybe they're reaching out to a version they see of me that's not real. Or maybe they're reaching out, but if I actually opened up to them, they'd run away. They don't know what they're really asking for. They don't know that they really want to help me. Or even, you know, sometimes people don't reach out in the ways that we understand, right? They're reaching out in a way that we don't fully understand as reaching out. Or, you know, there's just like a lot of different aspects to it. But when it comes down to it, like, yeah, when you do struggle with yourself and who you are, it's just really, really difficult to acknowledge the people who are trying to love you.
근데 너가 이제 그때 그 사건이 있고 나서 너가 좀 시야가 좀 확보된 것 같아.
맞아.
우리가 진짜 뭐 많았잖아, 우여곡절이. 근데 항상 그것들을 다 거치고 나면 한 단계씩 성장하는 느낌이었어. 너도 그렇고 나도 그렇고. 우리 둘 다 애잖아.
그치.
얼마나 용기를 냈는지 내가 아니까. 막 그때 휴가 그 기간이었었는데 평소 같았으면 우리 막 서로가 휴가 뭐 하지도 않잖아. 갑자기 나 삿포로야? 엥? 갑자기 너한테 카톡이 와 있는 거야. 나 삿포로인데 나도 다음 주에 가려고 히히.
볼까?
뭘까 이 사람
이용.
이건 심리는 뭘까?
Oh
지금
no, this is
그때
such
그
an
미안함 때문에
ADHD.
뭔가 좀 더 이제 다가가려고 하는 것 같아. 근데 그게
Over-analysis.
얼마나 용기는 행동이야. 너도 그거 쉽지 않았을걸?
3시간 걸렸어.
3 hours.
거짓말 안 치고 3시간 걸렸어.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, that's there's some avoidance there, there's some preoccupation there, there's some like vacillation of the that's too much to unpack. I've got 10 minutes. Oh no, I've got 10 minutes and there's 8 minutes left of this episode. Cool. I have not succeeded at my goal of keeping this to a reasonable amount of time. But it is true. When we are more vulnerable, but with people, they like us more. So when we ask for help, people like us more. When we show vulnerability, people like us more. When we give people gifts or we allow people to give us gifts, people like us more. When we accept compliments, people like us more. This is just like all true things. So yeah, like, if you have people who you're close-ish to and you decide to be vulnerable with them, chances are really high that they will like you more afterwards. They'll understand you better. They'll think you're cooler. They'll see the amount of courage that took, right? And that's how they learn to be able to understand things like, oh, this is really weird behavior. They must be trying really hard, right? Instead of just like, what the fuck? You know? 3 hours.
진짜 거짓말 안 치고 하나도 안 붙이고 3시간 정도 걸렸어.
그때 좀 귀여웠어. 근데 너가 만약 그런 거 안 했잖아? 그러면 그냥 지냈을 것 같은데 이렇게까지 한이가 나한테 용기를 내는데 야 가만히 있을 수 없지. 좀 더 노력해보자 해가지고 이제 좀 자연스럽게 다시 돌아왔지 우리가.
나는 오히려 더 전보다 좋아진 것 같아.
나도.
너랑 내가.
뭔가 깊이 빠지지 않았으면 좋겠어. 우리 둘 다.
그치.
그런 성격이잖아. 파고드는. 한번
그 어둠의 끈을 잡아버리면
이렇게 계속 내려가지? 내려가다 보면 내가 내려가고 있는지도 몰라. 나는 둘 중에 하나가 저 밑으로 내려갔을 때 손 내밀어 줄 수 있는 사이?
갈았다. 잡아 임마.
야 올라와 하나. 그런. 나 근데 나 최근에 뭐 좀
Just
느꼈어.
two incredibly emotional nerds.
요즘 멤버들이 너무 좋아졌나 봐. 잘 삐져.
어.
옛날에는 누가 뭐라 해도 그냥 뭐 삐지는 느낌 안 들었거든. 지금 이제 삐지더라. 너가 그 이후로 멤버를 너무너무 좋아하는 것 같거든. 그리고 엄청 의지하고 기대하고 이러다 보니까 더 잘 삐지는 건가라는 생각이 들더라고.
쭝얼쭝얼 되는 게 많아졌어.
I think that probably also he was just sulking most of the time before, or and maybe not showing it, right? There is definitely something to the fact that when you become more open and vulnerable with people, you're going to communicate sadness more, you're going to communicate like feeling hurt more, you're going to communicate your wants and desires more. Whereas if you're putting people more at a distance, you're still going to feel lonely, right? Like that whole I feel lonely, I don't feel heard, I don't, if nobody's talking to me, like that is a type of sulking. But like it's so perpetual. And then you sort of break down those walls of avoidance, you let people close, you open up to people. You get more mentally like stable and understand yourself and your emotions more. You can express those emotions better, more effectively, more accurately as well. So sometimes it can seem like you've become more emotional, but really you're just actually engaging in those emotions more honestly.
근데 이렇게 꿍시렁 거려. 나한테
옛날에는 잘 안 그랬거든. 이제 너가 말한 기점 이후로 멤버들을 굉장히 진짜 마음적으로 엄청 좋아하게 됐어.
그러니까 옛날 같았으면 그냥 이렇게 그냥 가버리거든.
옛날에는 그거지. 너도 그렇고 나도 그렇고 날이 굉장히 선 애들이었어.
맞아.
근데 지금은
우리
그냥
진짜
몰라. 그냥 보면 그냥 진짜 동그란 키위 같아. 귀여워. 나 너가 좋아. 몰이 당하는 거를 좋아하는데 원래 그런 이미지고 한 단계 뛰어넘을 때가 있어요. 그럴 때 이제 확 삐지죠. 형들 라인이죠. 어디 베이거나 다치면 잘 됐다 이러고 그냥 가거든요. 나는 위로받고 싶은데 왜 그렇게 말하냐.
Oh, I'm thinking back to
진짜
the
많이 했었는데
one with Chan
한이가
about
돌아와서 너무 좋다.
I need to be taken
근데
care of.
우리를 더 좋아하는 눈빛으로 돌아와서 좋다. 약간 한이는 다마고치 키우는 기분이에요. 옛날에는 그런 외계인 같은 부분이 약간 이해도 안 되고 적응도 안 되고 뭐 어떻게 어디서부터 어디까지 맞춰가야 될지도 모르고 그랬었는데 다르다를 인정하고 나서부터는 그냥 귀여워요. 다마고치 키우는 기분. 근데 너랑 나랑은 진짜 약간 연애하듯이 싸워가면서 하나씩 맞춰가는 그런 연인 같아. 내가 지금 가장 기억에 남는 건 싸우다가
I've said this before. This type of back and forth, push and pull, like we're on bad terms, we're on good terms. That is not something romantic partners. That's not a healthy dynamic for romantic partners. That's not a healthy dynamic for life partners. It can be made into a healthy dynamic between friends. And it sounds like it's happening less frequently over time, and it sounds like they're sort of aware of what happens, and I'm sure there are triggers for it, right? Like sleep deprivation, etc., and so forth. They're both also just very emotional people, and I'm sure that they sort of trigger each other's emotionality. That is not what a healthy long-term life partnership would look like. Yeah. Like, I'll see that when people say, like, So when people have an infant, they basically become the worst versions of themselves, right? And like in that situation where we're sort of talking something different because there's just no way to be the best version of yourself with a 3-month-old, you know, and working a job and like whatever. Like it's just not gonna be possible. But overall, that should not be that's not a sign of a generally healthy relationship to be in that cycle.
좀 큰 소리를 냈어. 근데 너가 이제 큰 소리 내는 게 싫다는 거야. 너 기억나냐?
내가 소리치지 마 이랬어.
어.
내가?
그때 나 우리 한강에서 근데 뮤직뱅크 그 끝나고 나서 뭔가 했었어. 서로 장난을 치다가 내가 큰 소리를 냈어. 장난식으로. 그때 토라졌지. 좀 지나고 나서 너랑 나랑 또 싸우게 됐어. 우리 둘 다 이제 언성이 높아지다가 내가 진짜 소리를 한번 질렀단 말이야. 야, 뭐 이렇게 하면서. 근데 너가 이제 거기서 소리 지르지 말라고! 나는 소리 지르는 거 싫다고! 막 이랬었어. 그래서
내가 그랬어?
나는 싸우다 보니까 언성이 높아지는 건 어쩔 수 없지 않냐. 너 지금은 그런 게 아니라
Not necessarily.
장난칠 때도 너가 나한테 막 소리 지르는
Normal
거
versus
싫었어.
healthy.
그때는 나도 어렸으니까
어지러지하네.
그래라 이러고 다시 나 방 들어가고. 근데 내가 잘못했지. 소리 지르면 안 됐지. 연애야 우리는.
오, 야 더워.
너 땀이 왜 이렇게 많이 나지?
조금 더운데 방금 내가 소리 지르지 마 이랬다고 하고 지금 더워. 갑자기 더워졌어. 우와.
So
진짜 애기
normal and
같았어.
reasonable. I don't know why that's such an embarrassing thing for him. Yeah, a lot of people don't like being yelled at. It fucking sucks. Being yelled at fucking sucks. And it's also really triggering for a lot of people. And especially if you have any type of sensory overload, like it can be really shocking to a nervous system that processes a lot of sensory information. Yeah, no, being yelled at fucking sucks. Don't yell at people. And obviously, yeah, like they were kids. I'm not like calling out Hyunjin here. I don't understand why Han is so embarrassed by this. Maybe because I don't know if it's just like culturally more acceptable or more reasonable. Or if he doesn't like that he responded emotionally in an emotional situation. I'm not sure, but that sucks. It's super normal.
연애에서 결혼한 사람들.
우리의 끝은 결혼이야 그럼. 큰일 났네 이거.
노장 노부부가 될
This is such a
사람들.
weird
우리의 끝은 결혼이야
narrative.
그럼.
사람. 근데 우리 진짜 애기 같았어. 막 몇십 년 연애에서 결혼한 사람들.
우리의 끝은 결혼이야 그럼.
Date for decades and get married.
노장
You should be in a really
노부부가 될
stable.
것 같은 느낌.
너무
약간
우리는
우리가 한 60대 70대 되잖아?
어.
우리만큼 잘 맞는 사람 없을걸?
그럴 것 같긴 해.
우리는 다 경험해봤거든. 그냥 진짜 장기 연애 커플 같은 느낌? 그러니까 진짜 징하게도
It's not.
싸웠다. 싸운 수가 많다는 거는 어쨌든 이겨내고 화해한 순간도
Yes,
많다는
and,
거잖아. 그렇게 해서 더
I-
돈독해지고 단단해지는 순간들도 되게 많다고 생각이 들어서
I've
또
gone
다시
on
막 자리
this sort of
생겼을 때
tangent before in
가장
one of my other
빨리
reactions. I
이겨낼
think it
수
was the
있는 사람이지
ChanSung
않을까.
one, so I won't
나는
redo it.
현진이가
but
요즘 그거를
Yeah.
정말 많이 해. 사랑하면 바보 같대.
it's not a good example of
아, 근데
what
내가
fuck
요즘
shit.
느낀 게 있거든? 나 멤버들한테 좀 애교가 생긴 것 같아.
맞아.
나도
Again, it can work as friends, right? Especially your friends in a really close situation, you have to work it out. But like when we measure toxicity in a relationship, we're not just measuring like, is it always bad? We're actually measuring those fluctuations. And if you have really high highs, but then also like a number of low lows, like we're looking at higher, like, it's just not great. Like that's just not what you want. And I think that, you know, they spend a lot of time together, but they're also not, it sounds like based on what they're saying, they're not necessarily living together like life partners. They're not necessarily engaging with each other like life partners or like real platonic life partners like some of the members are. You know, I just talked about, you know, yesterday with Seungmin and Felix, that regardless of what their relationship is, they have sort of this, you know, nesting partnership, sort of regardless of what that like means to them emotionally. That's not what this relationship is. And so there's a lot more ability to like it's not as detrimental to your well-being to be in that sort of back and forth, but that's not a healthy back and forth dynamic. So don't take that as an idea of what a healthy back and forth dynamic is.
맞이하려고 해.
왜?
그런 내 모습이 너무 싫어. 근데 자꾸 이렇게
귀엽다니까 거기 되게.
이렇게 막 장난을 치고
바보.
생겼을 때 생각이 들어서 또 다시 막
And it is true that conflict is
생겼을
important,
때
and you learn
가장
how to
빨리
get through conflict
이겨낼 수
faster
있는 사람이지 않을까.
over time,
나는
eventually.
현진이가 요즘
But
그거를 정말 많이 해. 사랑하면 바보 같대. 바보.
what are you getting at
근데
there,
내가
huh?
요즘 느낀 게 있거든.
Okay, we're just gonna move past that? Cool, fine.
나 좀 자제하려고 해.
왜?
그런 내 모습이 너무 싫어. 근데 자꾸 이렇게
귀엽다니까 거기 되게.
이렇게 막 장난을 치고 싶단 말이야 멤버들한테. 근데 장난을 치려고 하다 보면 애교가 돼 그게.
그치. 너 애가 귀엽다니까. 넌 너무 귀여워. 너는 귀여워.
He
너는
has to
귀여워.
accept.
나 귀여운가? 우리가 해외 투어 가서 싸웠을 때 무대 위에서 화했을 때
아이고.
서로 이렇게 랩하면서 마주보면서
거의 강백호랑 서통이었어.
그렇게 자연스럽게 화해한 것도 난 좋았어. 으악! 그러다가 한 번에 다들 정신 차리고 진짜 어떡하지 미안한데.
근데 아직
That
진짜
really high
많이
emotional
어리다
reactivity.
우리. 아직도. 지금도.
어른 되려면 아직 한참 남았지.
한참 먼 것 같아.
어른 어떻게 하는 건데 그거.
So what does it
우리가
mean?
아는
Yeah,
이상적인
that's
어른이
just
되는 게
like kind of a
굉장히
fake
어려운 것
thing.
같아.
나이가 중요한 것보다는 좀 더 경험을 해야 되지 않을까 세상에 대한. 우리는 지금 어쨌든 좁은
I
세상 안에
think so much of
있으니까.
it is accepting that it's kind
그러려면
of a
아직
fake
한참
thing.
남았지. 앞으로도 멤버들을 계속 믿고 의지해줬으면 좋겠어. 이렇게 한 단계씩 쌓아가면서 돈독해져가는 관계는 또 그렇게 많지 않다고 생각을 하거든. 어떻게 보면 이것도 참 운명이다라고 생각이 드는 것 같아. 언제든지 돌아올 수 있는 너의 집이 있을 거다. 열심히 해보자. 사랑한다.
I love that
열심히
Hyunjin
낭만
is
있는
clearly speaking on
삶을
behalf of all the
꾸고
members there. and It's
그리면서
just like
살았으면 좋겠다.
true.
근데 이거 그 기카로 찍어야 되지?
그럼 뭘로 찍어?
나 스노우.
너 남자다.
스노우지.
상남자야.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Way to go. I uninstalled Snow.
자, 허가고.
Didn't like some of the weird.
안녕 하나. 참 많이도 다투고 울고 웃고 추억도 그만큼 많이 만든 것 같은데 너라는 친구가 있는 게 나에겐 얼마나 자랑스러운 일인지 너는 몰라. 나는 그렇게 인연에 얽매이지 않으려고 하는 사람인데 너를 굳이 집착한 이유는 너가 그만큼 소중했어서인지도 몰라. 너의 유머도 감성도 음악도 다 좋아하는 팬인 내가 너와 같이 팀을 하고 있는 게 어떤지 너는 모르겠지. 잘하고 있어. 앞으로도 싸우고 풀고
I love that
애틋하게
Hyunjin can
지내보자.
really
사랑한다.
tell when somebody needs a lot of words, right? When somebody needs that kind of validation.
현진아 항상 낭만 있게 지금처럼 살자. 렛츠 공생 하트 한이가
The difference in those messages is wild. It's very funny. Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll just say is kind of on conflict. It is. I really don't want to make it sound like I'm saying that, that type of vacillating conflict is bad or doesn't have good outcomes or things like that. It certainly can. I do think we see it a lot more in fiction than we do in real life of it having that type of positive outcome, but especially when you're like in a situation where you are stuck together, right? Because if you have that type of vacillating conflict with somebody who's just like a person, you're generally not going to hold on to that relationship because it's generally not going to be healthy for you two. But you're sort of stuck in a situation where you need to make it work. You need to fucking make it work. And conflict can be really healthy and useful for, that's how you grow. Conflict is how you grow. How you engage in conflict, there are more healthy and more unhealthy ways to do so, more pro-social, more anti-social ways to do so. Teenagers, notoriously not good at dealing with conflict in like really healthy, mature ways, right? This is all true. This is all totally fair. So obviously with their sort of vacillations, they could have given up on trying to create like a really close, meaningful relationship. That's sort of what Hyunjin was saying, was that like that option was on the table. Um, Even if they did live together, you can still kind of ignore a roommate. Even if they're also your coworker, right? You can still kind of like not be that close. You can make that decision. And they've just continuously made the decision to not make that decision, right? That they want to try. This is something that Hyunjin has sort of said in the past as well about other relationships, is that like, or he's alluded to, that he tends to try harder when he sees that they try. Which makes a lot of sense based on both his personality and based on like how people engage with other people. I think he sort of talked about this a little bit with like Felix in their last Two Kids room, in 2022. He's sort of alluded to it with when he's talked about how his and Changbin's relationship has grown. But like, he works harder in response. Again, makes a lot of sense sort of based on his level of like impulsivity and emotional impulsivity as well. So these types of escalations and these emotional escalations can absolutely help us grow through conflict and figure things out together. That does not mean that's how we want to build those relationships, right? We don't want intense emotional escalation to be our primary driver. And again, especially if we're looking at the relationships that are supposed to be the most stable, our life partnerships, again, whether those are platonic life partnerships or romantic life partnerships or whatever they are, those are things that we're supposed to be able to rely on no matter what. And I have worked with people to change their relationships from ones that are volatile into ones that are not volatile, but it is very rare. I have seen it happen successfully, very, very rarely, that a life partnership is able to move from having, kind of these cycles of volatility and then stability into something that is successful long term. Usually I see that they can manage it anywhere, depending on the situation, from like 2 to even 10 years. If it goes that long, though, and often if it goes longer, it often, it often is emotionally abusive in some way. It often grows to become emotionally abusive eventually. A lot of it's not great. Again, this is not saying that this is always an emotionally abusive situation. It's not saying that it's a bad way to grow through conflict. It's not saying that anything they're saying about their relationship is untrue at all. I just really, 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 really don't want people to come away thinking that like the whole all couples fight sometimes means that like it's always a cycle of intense emotional reactions from both parties. That's not great. I've never seen that be an indicator of a highly successful, healthy emotional relationship. Whenever I have seen that in relationships, our goal has been to reduce that volatility. And it's only upon reducing it that people become happier. And now they understand how to reduce it better because they've had it in the past. But like, it's just like this idea that like you have to have trauma in order to grow. You don't. You can get to post-traumatic growth, right? Like post-traumatic growth can be incredibly powerful. You can grow from trauma in a way you may not have otherwise, but there's nothing about trauma that makes people grow more successfully or better. And in fact, it is far more likely to stunt growth over time, right? It just is possible to have post-traumatic growth, right? And so that type of volatility in a relationship, it is possible to build a better relationship from that, especially when you have some amount of emotional distance and you're able to build some amount of emotional barriers. And this isn't like your main relationship for your emotional security. But that's not how we want to move through conflict. Conflict is natural and good and healthy. There are, ways to move through it. Ideally, cyclical, high emotional reactivity is not that way. Media would indicate to us otherwise, right? And I think that for a lot of people who learn how to interact with the world through media, which is very, very common, is that people try to read books or try to watch shows or try to learn how to people or how other people normally do things or what it is to be a normal person from media. Of course, they'd be led to believe that that's normal. And that it usually has positive outcomes because we need dramatic tension in stories. But yeah, I just really want to emphasize that. Anyway, I have to go immediately. So I'm giving you no content updates because I gave those yesterday. It wasn't yesterday for you, but it was yesterday for me. So it's the same update. Once again, goodbye. I have no sign off.